When the goodness of God seems like it's passed you by, life seems hard to cope. Disappointment, mistakes will come and challenge your faith, and every day will seem like there's no hope. But with Jesus on your side, things will get better. With Jesus on your side, things will get better. So never give up, never give in. He's always on time. Never give up, never give in. The Lord is on your side. Sleepless nights and painful thoughts have left you confused, broken and hurt inside. Unanswered prayers and no one cares have made you feel all alone. With Jesus on your side, things will get better. But with Jesus on your side, things will get better. So never give up, never give in. He's always on time. Never give up, never give in. The Lord is on your side.
Untitled Health Outreach, providing information and support while encouraging hope and faith. Just waiting for a few more minutes here. Okay, we're going to get started. Again, this is It's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach with your host, Sister Arnetta Legree. You can find out more about us by logging onto our website at Post Office Box 7432, Silver Spring, Maryland 20910. You can email us at igbatt1@AOL.com. You can log on to our website at igbatt.com or igbattmho.org. It's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach, providing information and support while encouraging hope and faith to individuals who are living with the symptoms of a mental illness, severe mental illness, or negative life situation. Again, log on to our website, igbattmho.org or igbatt.com. We have a lot of information and support. Today, what I wanted to talk about, as always, mental illness. Right? We talk about mental illness from a faith-based perspective. We believe that Jesus Christ is Lord. We believe that Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, can heal. We also believe that He heals in different ways. When Jesus rose from the dead, rose from the dead, He took all illness and sicknesses, diseases were conquered with Him. For some people, we realize that healing may come on this side, and for others it may come on the other side. But we do believe that He heals. But we also believe that while we're waiting for that healing process to occur, whether it's instantly on this side or instantly on the other side, there are things that we can do. We're not waiting passively. We're not just, it's real easy to say that you have faith, but faith can be a front for fear, actually. It's not that you have faith, it's that you have fear. It's not that you have faith, it's that you're afraid to make a decision. You're afraid to make a choice. And this looks like you have faith. But we understand that, as I always say here, the highest form of faith is actually trusting God. When you can trust Him, it's not about how loud you speak or how well you speak or the words you say. Is if you can simply trust Jesus Christ. And when you can do that, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, then things will turn out much better. But again, we wanted to talk about mental illnesses. But before I do that, I wanted to just open up with discussing, just briefly, those of you who've watched me before, you already know this. When we talk about mental illnesses, We're talking about brain illnesses. We're talking about illnesses that impact a person's thought, feelings, and behaviors to such a degree that you can see impairments. When we talk about severe and persistent mental illnesses, we're talking about a subcategory or a group of illnesses that are so severe that they impact all aspects of an individual's life, to include their thoughts, feelings, and behavior. We're talking education, relationships. Severe and persistent mental illnesses include things like schizophrenia, bipolar, and in some cases major depression. So we talked about that before. We talked about how the term severe mental illness or severe and persistent mental illness is actually a federal term that kind of identifies there's certain subset of illnesses for particular reasons. When we look at the causes of mental illnesses, okay, people always want to get into what causes a mental illness. And causes are shaped just like by anything. Behavior, biological, psychological, and social factors all work together to shape why a person gets an illness. It's just like any other illness. A person may have a predisposition for having a certain illness, or two people in the same family may have a predisposition for having a certain illness. One person may get it, the other person may not. It has a lot to do with the environment, has a lot to do, of course, hereditary, but it also has a lot to do with the way that person's thought process, for whether that person eat right, maybe the other person doesn't eat right. So it has a lot, it's a combination of things. There's not one cause, there's not one thing that we can point to and say this is why a person has a mental illness. I'm just going to list some of the reasons. We're looking at biological. The brain is made up of nerve cells called neurons and chemicals called neurotransmitters that receive and transmit messages or signals. So with some illnesses, it's biologically based. We know that because of what's going on in the brain, well, all the illnesses are mediated by the brain. When we look at the causes, one of the causes could be biological, okay? Another cause when we talk about hormones, when you think about postpartum disorder, for example, or menopause, different hormones, physical illnesses can lead to mental illnesses when you look at traumatic brain injuries, for example. And of course you have hereditary, well, the factors are genetic factors are transmitted from one generation to the next, okay? Then of course you have the psychological, where some mental illnesses may be triggered by a psychological trauma suffered as a child, such as severe emotional, psychological, sexual abuse. There are several mental illnesses, and depending on the mental illness, it corresponds with a why. So for example, like I was saying, postpartum, we know that's hereditary. When we look at depression, we know we're looking at, schizophrenia, we know we're looking at biological. When we look at bipolar, we know we're looking at hereditary more. But again, there is no one answer, because you can have, again, two people whose parents, both parents are diagnosed, say, for example, with bipolar, and one child gets it and one child doesn't. So there are a lot of different factors that go into it. And we also, because we are faith-based, we also talk about the spiritual aspect of it, or people like to say the demonic aspect of it. I can tell you that for many times, let me say this, in any illness, whenever it could be PMS, it could be you stub your toe, or whatever it is, any illness that you have, you're always going to have a spiritual component that's going to go along with it. Because what happens is, with a lot of illnesses, it kind of brings your feelings down, your morale down. You're not feeling well, and it's during those moments when the enemy can slip in. So there is a component with that. But what we're talking about here, we're not talking about demonic illnesses. We're not talking about illnesses that are a result of demonic possession or anything like that. Because I say it like this: if that were the case, then all you would have to do is pray and cast that spirit out, if that was the case, right? So this is not the case here. We're talking about illnesses, brain illnesses, that impact a person's thoughts, feelings, and behavior to various degrees. We're talking about illnesses in some cases where a person may have to take medications, sometimes they may not, or they may take medications for a short period of time. Other times they may have to take it for a long period of time. We're actually talking about brain-based illnesses, and illnesses, just like any other illness, can be there is a spiritual component that can go along with it. Demons, if you want to use that term, can harass or can aggravate, but they don't cause. That's not what we're talking about here. Now, so let me move on. What impact of untreated mental illnesses? Impact of untreated mental illnesses. There are a lot of people. I want to show you my cup. You can go on our website and order it. There are a lot of people who suffer in silence for various reasons. One of the main reasons is called stigma. Stigma is that embarrassment, that fact that we don't want other people to know what we're dealing with. So we suffer in silence. We don't share. The problem with that is that the longer a person goes, if a person has an untreated mental illness, the longer they go without treatment, the harder it is, the poorer the long-term outcome for that individual. We have a lot of young people. Mental illnesses, many times, some of them can be seen when a person is younger. So many times, with a young person, if they don't get that help, that support, whether that's therapy, somebody to talk to, early enough, they develop poor or negative coping strategies. So a lot of people that are adults now, young adults now, started using drugs when they were younger. Right? They started using drugs when they were younger as a way to self-medicate and not even realize what they were self-medicating. Not even realizing that, okay, I have bipolar or I have depression. They didn't know. All they were doing was trying to self-medicate their feelings, not really knowing what those feelings are. So now you have someone who in their 20s and 30s have a drug addiction, where if they would have gotten help earlier, that might not have been the case. So when we look at mental illnesses, we want to try to identify and treat early, because the earlier we do it, the better the outcome. And treatment doesn't always include medications. It can be talk therapy, So I don't want people to think that, but many times people do suffer in silence for various reasons. So like I said, the problem with the untreated mental illnesses, it can cause disruption in work history, disruption in family life. For me, I'm going to list these, but for me, the biggest problem with an untreated mental illness is the potential, the impact, the negative impact that it has on a person's potential. One of our motto here is that we believe that God, everyone has been created for a purpose, and we really mean that. Jesus Christ's words said, "I've come that you might have life and life more abundantly." The enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy, but I have come that you might have life and life more abundantly. Mental illnesses, untreated mental illnesses, gives the enemy an upper hand. It allows the enemy to come in to kill, steal, and destroy. And what it does, it destroys potential. And the problem with that is when potential is destroyed, it slows down, or it can eradicate the plan that God had for this individual life. Many times people go to the grave not even having realized their full potential because of other things that have gotten in the way. So when you look at the impact of an untreated or poorly treated mental illnesses, I listed a few here: disruption in work history, disruption in family life, negative feelings, jail. The jail is full of people with untreated mental illnesses or poorly treated mental illnesses. Homelessness, right? You see some people out on the street and you know that they're not doing well mentally. Chronic medical problems. We know individuals who are living, especially with severe and persistent mental illnesses, die much earlier than the regular population. Why? Because of their symptoms. Loss of potential, I said that. Loss of hope, tiredness, increased stress, feelings of helplessness, grief, fear, worry, anger. All of these can go along with the impact of untreated or poorly treated mental illness. If you're a family member and you're not really sure what's going on with your loved one, or the mental illness is not treated, it can cause a lot of grief. It can cause a lot of worry. They're out on the street, you don't know if they're hurt. It can cause a lot of fear. It can cause, if you're the person that's living with the illness and you know that something is going on with you, it can cause embarrassment, it can cause shame. And all of these negative things work together to kill, steal, and destroy a person's potential. But we're saying again that Jesus Christ has come that you might have life and life more abundantly. And one of those ways that you have that life more abundantly is utilizing all of the tools that He has for you: prayer, praise, worship, fasting. Those are tools that God has for you. And as you do those things, He'll give you wisdom in how to utilize the other tools. And the other tools are medications, if that's the case. Talk therapy, managing your stress. Looking at what's causing you stress, what's causing you pain, and doing something about it. It's not just sitting back passively, okay? So, again, I just want to share a few terms. Mental health, I talked about that. Mental health, the term that refers collectively to all mental disorders, which are health conditions. Remember that mental illnesses are health conditions, impact a person's thoughts, feelings, or behavior, or a combination thereof. Mental health problems, we may say this person has a mental health problem, or basically speak to those signs and symptoms that don't really meet the requirement for a mental illness. Before we can say a person has a mental illness, that person has to meet a certain, should have a certain amount of symptoms for a certain amount of time, depending on the illness that you're looking at. Mental health problem, a person may have what looks like maybe a full-blown mental illness, but the symptoms just don't meet that high enough standard, okay? And I just wanted to kind of share a couple of things here. Let me go to my slide. When we talk about, going back to what I was saying, why do people, who gets it and that kind of things, I think there are certain risk factors. There are certain things, there are certain protective factors, and then there are certain risk factors. When we look at risk factors are those factors that are biological, psychological, family, community, or cultural that are associated with a higher likelihood of negative outcomes. There are risk factors and then there are protective factors. Then there are characteristics that are associated, risk factors are characteristics that are associated with lower or negative outcomes, where protective factors are those factors that are associated with more of a higher outcome. So a person may have a predisposition, or a person may have something going on with them, but because of their protective factors such as prayer, such as church, such as medication, such as someone to talk to, can help to mediate or decrease some of those negative symptoms, where if you risk factors, a person can have a predisposition, but because of their risk factors, it's even worse, okay? So we look at what are some risk factors. Low self-esteem. If a person is already not feeling okay about themselves, that's a risk factor. So that means if other negative things happen in life, that their self-esteem is you're going to see it on display. They're going to immediately go into this, why me, what happened, the world is falling apart, people don't like me, because they already had that low self-esteem. People, we were talking earlier about church hurt, right? Or anytime you engage with people, whether it's church, work, family, there's going to be some misunderstandings, there's going to be some hurt. But one of the reasons why I believe that more people are have a predisposition for being hurt than others has to do with some of these risk factors here. There are some people who are more are healthier when it comes to self-esteem issues, right? Not necessarily, are healthier, and some people are less so. So when you talk about risk factors, one of the risk factors is low self-esteem. Okay, so a person can say something, and one person could take it here and be okay, and another person could just take it totally to heart and take it personally. Well, that's because they were already not feeling okay about themselves. Just because a person acts, confident, or many times it's the person that's loud, that's calling attention to themselves. Those are the people that usually got the most issues. Okay, but anyway, risk factors: low self-esteem. Medical illness is a risk factor. And I'm listing what are these risk factors are? These are some risk factors to mental illness, risk factors to emotional illness, risk factors to, not feeling okay. These are risk factors that can cause you to be less okay with your life. Low self-esteem. Medical illness. Whenever you're ill, as I said before, you may not just feel okay. You may not just feel, you just blah. Right? Loneliness can be a risk factor. Bereavement, neglect, when we talk about children, or families or adults as well. Family conflict, exposure to violence, abuse. We have some people who live in homes where they are dodging, not necessarily bullets, but they're dodging fists all the time. They're dodging parents cursing them out. Some parents curse kids out like worse than their animal, like an animal, you know. But when you're dealing with this on a regular basis, this is exposure to violence, abuse, low income, and poverty. And it's not just the low income and poverty, it's what can go along with low income and poverty. Think about it. What goes with low income or poverty is all of these other things. Because it's kind of like your family may be fine. Because I think many people grew up in poverty and they were okay. So, but there were other protective factors around us. You had family, you had church, you had parents that were good parents, right? So you may have grown up in poverty, but or low income, but your family didn't, I want to say act like they were low income, but you had people around you that that protected that formed a cover. Nowadays, unfortunately, you have people who are in poverty and they don't have that cover. Because when you think about it, some of the, and I'm not going to say that, but think about some of the places where in your city where people live, and then you and drive by, and as you drive by, you notice that it's a group of people. Why are so many people living in this type of environment, in this type of apartment complex, all in one group? Well, people tend to gravitate towards each other. Sometimes people tend to gravitate towards each other. Sometimes that's where their money takes them. But in that group, you have a lot of good people, but you also have crime. Why? Because that's where people tend to, who are unethical, tend to kind of gravitate towards those types of places. You have that type of stuff. When you have low income and you have poverty, you have people willing to do anything. Some people who are willing to do anything. You have some people who may be strung out on drugs and will do anything. So anyway, all of this, these factors are risk factors. Injustice is a risk factor. We talked, of course, exposure to war or a disaster can be a risk factor. So, you know, a friend of mine, when the first Katrina, not first, but when Katrina hit, and I can't believe that was 16 years ago, wow. When Katrina hit, she was in New Orleans at the time, and every year since then, whenever something happens, she's triggered by it. She's just automatically triggered. And when I mean triggered, I mean emotionally. Emotionally, she's triggered. Just when she hears about an impending hurricane or tornado, she immediately gets nervous. She wants to pack up, and even if it's not even close to her home, she just gets real anxious and nervous. So that's what I mean when I say a person is triggered. So an exposure, a previous exposure to a war or disaster can lead to stress, can lead to weigh on a person's mental illness or mental state. Discrimination, as I said before, poor access to basic services. Having a blood relative, such as a parent or sibling with a mental illness, can be a risk factor. A previous mental illness can be a risk factor. Stressful life situations, such as financial problems, a loved one's death, or a divorce. Any ongoing chronic medical condition. Brain illnesses, I talked about traumatic injuries. Alcohol or drugs, being abused or neglected as a child. Having few friends or few healthy relationships. All of these are risk factors. These are things that if something were to happen in your life, okay, I got into a car accident, and I had any of these risk factors, it could make me being in a car accident even worse. You know, the emotions that go along with being in a car accident even worse. Okay, if I got laid off from my job, okay, any of these risk factors can make being laid off from my job, how I feel about being laid off from my job, even worse. Okay, so if I'm laid off from my job and I'm already dealing with low self-esteem, I'm automatically going to go inward and turn on myself. Whereas if that's not the case, and I have a lot of other protective factors, I get thrown up, fired from my job. I'm like, oh well, maybe it's time for me to do something else. So it varies as far as what individuals are doing. Okay, varies what individuals are doing. Okay. So as I say, use of alcohol or recreational drugs, being abused, all of these can be risk factors, okay? Protective factors, things that can protect you, okay? Include self-esteem, confidence, right? Ability to solve problems and manage stress or adversity, communication skills, being able to communicate, social support of family and friends, good parenting, family interaction, physical security and safety, satisfaction and success at work, moral beliefs, values, participation in church or other community group, because it's a connection, religion, spirituality, like I said, resourcefulness, family, kinship bond, community involvement. All of these things can be protective factors. So again, I get into a car accident, but I have my ability to solve problems. I'm able to kind of do that pretty well. I have family support. I got somebody I can call. I have somebody else, I can borrow somebody else's car. All of these things can help for us, a protective factor when I'm dealing with an illness, okay? Now, when you talk about having a mental illness, as I said before, there are certain strengths. One of the strengths are those protective factors. Faith, religion, supportive people. All of these things can help, right? Supportive people. You know, a lot of times we go through life and thinking we doing things on our own, and that's not the case. Supportive people can provide support, tangible support, but they can also provide that moral support. They can also kind of mirror for us, hey, you're not the only one going through this. No, I'm not going through exactly what you're going through, but you're not the only one. You know, sometimes when your enemy likes to get us in a vacuum, or when we're in a vacuum and we only looking at things one way, we can feel down and depressed, right? We can feel down and depressed and think we're the only one in the world going through what we're going through. And when you get into a group of other people with shared experiences, you can realize, hey, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who feels this way. I'm not the only one who thinks this way, okay? When you get in that particular group of individuals, so supportive people. But the enemy would desire to separate us. He would desire to get us alone, away from other people, where we're just alone with our own thoughts. And all we can just think about how bad things are going for us in our life, okay? So we definitely need supportive people. Sometimes people will say, and it's true, when you're not feeling well, you don't really feel like being around people. And sometimes you need that moment, you need a break. Sometimes it's fine. But if you find yourself doing that, you need to set a limit. You need to set a time, and you have to make yourself do some things, right? If you find yourself in that state, then you may need to talk to someone about maybe taking some medications or increasing your clinical, your therapy, things of that nature. Okay, I'm sorry, I was distracted over here. Your medications, you may need to do that. Because you don't want to say, well, I'm not going to take any medications, I'm not going to do anything, I'm just going to trust God, but then your quality of life is poor. See, the whole idea behind Jesus Christ when he said, I've come that you might have life, and life more abundantly, is not for you to stay or continue to have a poor quality of life. If you find yourself unable to get up, because you're just so down and you're so depressed, I get that, I understand that, and there may be times when that happens, but if you find yourself in a state, then that's when you want to make sure that you're seeing someone, that you're talking to your doctor. I think on one hand, people like to say, reach out. And sometimes people will say, I'm so depressed, I don't feel like reaching out. And that's true. And I get that. But then there are some times when, if you find yourself in that situation, for the sake of your destiny, for the sake of what God has for you, you're going to have to want to reach out to your doctor and say, look, we might need to do something with the medications. Because there are medications, there are treatment where you don't have to feel that way, where your quality of life can be improved. I told this, maybe not here, but I told this story.